On discharge day, my daughter didn't pick me up from the hospital. I went somewhere she'd never expect. They wheeled me out to the sidewalk at 3:06 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I sat there for 47 minutes watching strangers get into cars that weren't mine. That's when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore, I was leaving. The nurse who pushed me out had kind eyes. Her name tag said Elena, and she called me Mr. Holbrook, which made me feel more like a visitor than a patient. She smiled, tapped the top of my shoulder, and said, "You take care, okay? Your daughter's on the way." I nodded. I lied. I'd called Rebecca the day before, told her I was being discharged after 2 weeks recovering from pneumonia. She said, "Okay, I'll see what I can do," as if my return to the world was an item on her calendar she might need to reschedule. I should have known then. I should have heard what was loud and clear between the words. When the automatic doors closed behind me and the wheels of my old canvas suitcase stopped rolling, I just sat. Cars came and went. Nobody looked my way. My hands, liver-spotted and cold, rested on the suitcase handle like they were holding a story I hadn't told anyone in years. At 3:53 p.m., I stood. My legs were shaky, but I stood. And I didn't wait another minute. I didn't have a plan, but sometimes not having a plan is the only plan you need when your heart's been quietly breaking for years. I walked, past the short-stay parking, past the rust-colored bus stop bench where a woman was yelling into her phone, past the lot where hospital staff smoked cigarettes in blue scrubs. I didn't walk toward home. I walked toward memory. 3 blocks from the hospital was a place I hadn't seen in decades. An old Italian bakery that smelled like warm bread and regrets. It was still there, somehow. The sign was cracked, but the smell? The smell brought me back to 1974. Inside, a teenage boy with acne and a bandage on his thumb was stocking cannoli. He looked up at me and said, "Hi, sir. Do you sell those little almond cookies?" I asked. He nodded, reached under the glass, and brought up a white paper bag. $3. I gave him a 5 and told him to keep the change. I took my cookies and sat at the table by the window. I didn't eat them. I just held the bag and thought about the last time I came here. That was with my wife, Elaine. We were in our 40s. She had a headscarf on, because the chemo was cruel and unapologetic. But that day, she felt strong enough to go out. She smiled when she ate the almond cookies, said they reminded her of childhood. She said everything did, near the end. When Elaine died in '98, I built a shell around myself and called it coping. I stayed in that shell, even when Rebecca grew up. Even when she started to drift. Even when she didn't come home for Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or my birthday. I told myself she was busy, important, exhausted. I never admitted she was gone in the ways that mattered most. At 4:20 p.m., I left the bakery and kept walking. The sun was slanting low, like a warning that darkness was coming and I needed to figure out where I was going. I took a bus heading east. Didn't know where it stopped, didn't care. A woman with too many bags offered me a seat. I thanked her. My suitcase sat in my lap like a child I didn't know what to do with. Across from me was a man talking to himself. About baseball. About 1976. About Reggie Jackson and 3 home runs. I smiled. I remembered that game. The bus rattled and turned and stopped and moved again, and when I saw the street name Glenview, I pressed the bell. It wasn't where I lived, but once, a long time ago, it was where I dreamed of living. In 1965, before Rebecca, before we had a mortgage or a dog or insurance policies, I used to walk through Glenview with Elaine and talk about the kind of house we'd buy. White fence, roses, a tire swing in the backyard. The dreams you have when you're young enough to believe their promises. Now I stood in front of a rusted fence on Glenview Avenue, staring at a house that looked a little like the one we once imagined. A woman watered her plants in the front yard. She saw me. I nodded. She waved. I turned around and walked the other way. I didn't call a cab. I didn't call Rebecca again. Instead, I made my way to the train station by 6 p.m. I looked at the schedule and picked a town I'd never been to. River's End. It sounded peaceful, like the kind of place where you might still hear birds in the morning and someone might nod at you just because. The train arrived at 6:14. I had $42 in my wallet. The one-way ticket cost $18. I stepped on board. It was the first time in 27 years I'd left the city. The train was quiet. The window beside me showed a world passing by in streaks of green and gold. I closed my eyes for a while. My body was tired, but something inside me, something old and young at once, was awake. When I opened them, a little girl across the aisle was watching me. Her mother dozed beside her. "You're going on an adventure," she said. I smiled. "I think I am." She nodded with great seriousness. "I can tell. You have that look." "What look?" "The kind that says you used to do fun things, but forgot for a long time." I laughed softly. "That's a very smart observation. My grandpa used to look like that. Then he bought a kayak and scared my grandma." I laughed again. Really laughed. Probably for the first time in months. When the train pulled into Rivers End just past 8 o'clock, the sky was the color of bruised peaches, and the air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I stepped onto the platform and took a deep breath. No one knew me here. No one expected anything. That was the gift. I checked into a small motel with a flickering neon sign that said vacancy, like a warning or a welcome. The woman at the desk looked like she'd been waiting 30 years for something interesting to happen. "Passing through?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I'm just arriving." She gave me room 6 and said the hot water worked if you let it run long enough. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, suitcase by the door, and stared at the ceiling fan turning with a groan. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel old. I felt like I was beginning something. At 81 years old. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was restless. Because I was alive in a way I hadn't been in decades. In the morning, I walked into town. Got a coffee from a diner that smelled like eggs and wood polish. The waitress called me Han and didn't charge me for the refill. Her kindness made something ache in my chest, not pain. Exactly. Just a reminder that kindness is rare, and I'd forgotten how to receive it. I sat at the counter and wrote something on a napkin. Not a letter. Not a will. Just a thought. I'm still here. I'm still me. And I'm not done yet. I sat at the counter and wrote something on a napkin. Not a letter. Not a will. Just a thought. I'm still here. I'm still me. And I'm not done yet. That napkin stayed in my pocket all day. It felt like armor. I spent the next few hours walking the town. Rivers Inn wasn't big, but it had the kind of streets you wanted to wander down. Children rode bikes on the sidewalks. A man at the hardware store was arguing with someone about paint colors, and a dog with 3 legs lounged in front of a florist's shop like it owned the place. No one knew my name. No one called me Dad. No one looked at me with pity in their eyes. It was the kind of anonymity that felt like freedom, not loneliness. Around noon, I found myself drawn toward the park at the edge of town. An old wooden sign said Eaglewood Trailhead. Below it, in fading letters, a walk worth taking. I hesitated. My legs weren't what they used to be. I'd fallen just last month trying to put a ladder away, which is how I ended up in the hospital in the first place. The pneumonia came after, or maybe it had always been coming. But today, I wanted to see how far I could still go. The trail was gentle at first. Packed dirt. Some leaves. I passed a bench where someone had carved 1982, "Love lives here," into the wood. That made me smile. Then the path curved, then narrowed. And then something strange happened. I forgot I was 81. I forgot I was someone who'd sat on a hospital sidewalk alone. I walked until I was breathing hard, but smiling. I walked until the world got quiet, and I could hear the sound of birds and the whisper of trees. I walked until I found a little overlook with a view of the river. It was beautiful. Not dramatic, not grand, just the kind of beauty that sneaks up on you. The kind you don't realize you needed until it's right in front of you. There was another bench there, too. I sat down and pulled the napkin from my pocket. I added another sentence. I've never really let myself grieve the life I thought I'd have. When I got back into town, the sun was dipping low again. At the motel, the clerk asked if I'd be staying another night. I said yes. She didn't ask why. She just smiled and handed me a fresh key, even though I still had the old one. That night, I slept better. Not longer, just better. My dreams were quiet. I didn't see hospitals. I didn't hear my daughter's voicemail message in my head. I dreamed of the river, the trail, the scent of almond cookies, and the smile Elaine gave me when she thought I wasn't looking. The next morning, something pulled me toward the library. It wasn't big, just a brick building with white shutters and a sign that squeaked when the door opened. Inside, it smelled like dust and old paper. It smelled like places I used to live inside my mind when I still believed in stories. A woman behind the desk looked up and said, "Good morning." Her voice was soft but strong. She wore her hair in a silver bun and had reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. "First time here?" she asked. I nodded. I'm just visiting. Well, welcome. We don't ask for your whole life story unless you want to tell it. She smiled kindly. Her name tag said Marjorie. I wondered for a while. Found the large print section. Found the biographies. Found a seat by the window where the light fell in golden streaks across the carpet. For no real reason, I picked up a book about Japanese gardens and read it cover to cover. By the time I stood up again, it was nearly noon. Marjorie was still at the front desk, shelving a stack of donated books. I haven't seen someone get lost in a book like that in a while, she said. It's been a long time since I remembered how, I replied. She tilted her head. Do you write? Used to. Nothing published. That doesn't mean it wasn't worth writing. I nodded, slowly. Maybe I'll try again. I did. Back at the motel, I found a used notepad in the nightstand drawer, half the pages gone, the cover creased. I borrowed a pen from the front desk. I sat on the bed and just started. Not about Rebecca. Not about Elaine. I wrote about a man who leaves everything behind and moves to a town no one's ever heard of. I wrote about almond cookies and empty train seats and trails that remember your footsteps. I wrote about grief in lowercase letters and joy in all caps. I wrote until the sky turned indigo and the pen ran dry. The next day, I bought my own pen. A real one. The kind that makes you feel like what you're writing might matter. I also bought a shirt from the thrift shop and a mug that said, World's Okayest Grandpa. Even though no one in town knew I had a granddaughter. Or used to. By Friday, people in Rivers Inn started nodding at me on the sidewalk. I wasn't a stranger anymore. I didn't plan to stay. I kept telling myself it was just a few days. A little escape. Some air. But by Sunday morning, when I walked into the bakery on Main Street and the girl behind the counter said, Hey there, almond cookie guy, I realized something. I wasn't passing through anymore. I was becoming someone again. That afternoon, I called Rebecca. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the breeze. Maybe the coffee. Maybe it was just time. She didn't answer. Voicemail. Again. This time, I didn't apologize for calling. I didn't ask why she hadn't shown up. I just said, Hi. It's Dad. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm in a little town called Rivers End. You've probably never heard of it. But I think you'd like it here. I hope you're well. Tell Olivia I said hello. I paused. Then I added, I know I wasn't always the easiest father to talk to. I know I disappointed you in ways I never meant to. But I never stopped loving you. I want you to know that. And then, before I lost the courage, I ended the message. I didn't cry. I felt like I had before I met Elaine. Standing alone. Unsure. Hoping someone would say, I see you. That night, Marjorie from the library invited me to the community center's open mic night. Don't worry, she said. You don't have to perform. I went. There were teenagers with guitars. A man who recited a poem about his dog's bad breath. A young woman who sang off-key, but from the heart. Then someone tapped the mic and said, We've got a new face in town, he doesn't know it yet, but I think he's one of us. Would Mr. Holbrook like to read something? I froze. The whole room turned toward me. Kind eyes. Curious smiles. I stood. My knees shook a little. I walked up. Took out the napkin. Unfolded it. And read it. I'm still here. I'm still me. And I'm not done yet. I've never really let myself grieve the life I thought I'd have. But maybe, just maybe, the life I'm starting now is worth living out loud. The room was quiet for a long beat. Then came applause. Not the kind you hear at concerts. The kind that feels like a hug. After the applause, someone in the back shouted, You got more where that came from? A laugh rolled through the room. It wasn't mocking. It was warm, inviting. I surprised myself by smiling. I just might. I said into the mic, voice steadier now. You'll have to keep showing up to find out. And then I stepped down, the napkin still clutched in my hand like it had carried me across an invisible line. When I got back to my seat, Marjorie patted my arm. You just became part of the town, whether you meant to or not. I'm starting to think maybe I did mean to, I replied. She gave me a look something between knowing and kind, then turned back to the stage. That night back in my room, I didn't turn the light on right away. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window. The moon was low and quiet outside. Not bright, just present. It reminded me of Elaine in her last year, how she didn't need to say much anymore to be everything. I took out my notepad and began to write again. This time, I wrote about Rivers End. About the smell of muffins from the bakery and the way the kids rode their bikes like the world still made sense. about the sound of the library door creaking open, about how peace wasn't a moment, it was a place. Monday came. I woke early, before the sun, walked to the diner where Mary, I'd learned her name by now, poured me coffee before I even sat down. "You're early today," she said. "Didn't want to waste any of it," I replied. She smiled. "I like your attitude." She gave me an extra slice of banana bread. "On the house. You look like someone who deserves something sweet today." I took it, gratefully. That afternoon, I bought a used bicycle from a man named Ken, who ran a little garage behind the barber shop. $50, he said. "She's not pretty, but she'll get you there." I tested it in the alley. It wobbled at first, but so did I. I rode it to the river overlook. It felt like childhood and freedom and rebellion all at once. I stayed at the overlook for an hour, watching, listening, thinking. I added to my napkin again, even though the edges were fraying and the ink was fading. I think I've been waiting for someone to come save me. But maybe I've been the one holding the keys all along. That evening, I heard a knock on my motel door. I opened it to find Marjorie holding a book in one hand and a small loaf of something wrapped in foil in the other. "Figured you might be tired of diner food," she said. "Zucchini bread. My mother's recipe. It's practically a handshake where I come from." "Then I'm honored," I said. She handed me the book, Poems of the American Road. "I thought of you when I saw it," she added. "The way you talked about your walk. You've got a traveler's spirit." "I've been sitting still for so long. I forgot what that even meant," I said softly. "Well," she said, eyes twinkling, "I don't think you'll forget again anytime soon." She turned to go, then paused. "By the way, that napkin of yours, you should type it up. Give it some dignity. Maybe even a title." "A title?" She smiled. "Every good story has one." That night, I stared at the words I'd written on the napkin again. Then, on the top edge, I wrote 3 words in tiny, careful script. "The beginning again." The next few days passed in soft, golden rhythms. I helped Ken fix up another bike just for fun. I read aloud to children at the library during story hour. I helped the woman from the florist shop carry pots when it rained too hard and too fast. I attended a town hall meeting where people argued passionately about a new stop sign. I was becoming part of the daily hum. I was becoming known. And then, Friday evening, as I walked back from the park, I saw someone standing outside the motel office. She was facing the door, shoulders tight, one hand holding a phone. I stopped cold. It was Rebecca. She hadn't seen me yet. She looked different. Older, yes, but not just in years. In the weight she carried in her posture. In the way she kept glancing at the phone like it was going to save her from something. I watched her for a full minute before I took a breath and walked forward. She turned when she heard my steps. For a second, her eyes didn't believe it. "Dad," I nodded. "Rebecca." We stood there, both stunned by the moment we hadn't prepared for. She looked down at the suitcase beside her, then back at me. I got your voicemail." "I wasn't sure you would," I said honestly. She nodded. "I almost deleted it," she admitted. "But Olivia heard it. And she said, 'Mom, you should go.' So I did." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me. I didn't think you'd come." We stood in silence for a beat. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Not tight, not long, but real. It was the first time in 6 years I'd held my daughter. Inside the motel room, I poured her some water. She sat in the chair by the window. She looked around. "It's small. It's enough." She nodded, then looked at me with eyes that were still guarded. "I'm sorry I didn't come to pick you up," she said. "It wasn't just forgetting. It was complicated." I didn't say anything. I let her talk. I was angry and tired, and it felt easier to let the distance stay there. "But when I heard your voice on that message," she exhaled hard. "It didn't sound like the man I'd been mad at for so long. It sounded like my father. The one who used to read me Charlotte's Web twice in one night when I pretended to be scared." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm still that man, Rebecca. Underneath the mistakes and the years. I'm still him. And I've missed you every day." "I know," she whispered. Then, finally, tears came. For both of us. Not dramatic. Just necessary. We stayed up late that night, talking more than we had in a decade. About Elaine. About Olivia. About the silence that grew like ivy between us after the funeral. About how neither of us knew how to bridge the space between guilt and forgiveness. In the morning, I took her to the overlook. She stood there for a long time, wind brushing her hair across her face, and finally said, "I get why you came here." I said nothing, just reached out, and she took my hand. The next day, Rebecca asked if she could stay a little longer. I said yes before she even finished the question. We didn't try to fill every silence. We let them come and go, like waves that didn't need explanations. That morning, we had breakfast together at Mary's diner. Mary raised her eyebrows when she saw us walk in. "This your daughter?" she asked, pouring my coffee. "Yes," I said proudly. Rebecca smiled and nodded. Mary winked. Now that's a better day than Tuesday was. I hadn't told her what happened on Tuesday. I didn't need to. Some people just understand without needing the full story. Rebecca asked if she could visit the Overlook again by herself. I told her how to get there. While she was gone, I sat on the motel's porch and rewrote everything from the napkin into my notebook, clean, careful, like I was tending to something sacred. For the title, I wrote it again. The beginning again. When she came back, Rebecca looked like she'd let something go. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, and sat beside me. "You ever think about staying here for good?" I turned to her. "I already have." The next few days were something I never thought I'd get again. We cooked in the tiny motel kitchenette. We went to the farmer's market. We talked about Olivia, about how she liked astronomy now, about how she'd stopped calling me grandpa and started calling me the man who used to visit. That last one stung, but I'd earned it. "I'd like to fix that," I said, "if she'd let me." Rebecca nodded. "You'll have to be patient." But I think she'd be open to it. On the fifth morning, Rebecca told me she had to head back. Work, life, the things we all have to return to eventually. I walked her to the train station, held her suitcase while she tied her hair back. She hugged me again, tighter this time. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up. For showing me you were still in there." "I never left," I whispered. "I was just quiet." As the train pulled away, I didn't feel sad the way I thought I might. Because this time she'd come. And maybe next time, she'd come back. Rivers End kept me. Weeks passed. I moved out of the motel and into a small rented room above the florist's shop. The landlord's name was Joyce, and she reminded me of a younger Elaine, sharp-tongued, sweet-hearted, and tough as an old tree root. "Don't think I'll cut you slack just because you're charming," she told me on the first day. I smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. I began volunteering at the library twice a week. Marjorie insisted I start a writing group. "You've got words in you," she said. "Other people do too. You just have to help them find them." So I did. 3 people came the first week. 7 the second. We called it Pages at Dusk. We met every Thursday at 5:30, just as the light began to change. People brought poems and half-written letters, stories about old lovers and new beginnings. A teenager named Levi read a story about a robot who learns to feel grief. A woman named Connie wrote haikus about her late husband's fishing trips. We laughed. We cried. We wrote. And I began to realize something. This town didn't just give me peace. It gave me purpose. One night in late October, I heard a knock at my door. It was Joyce, the landlord. She held a cordless phone in her hand. "It's for you," she said, eyes curious but not unkind. "Says she's your granddaughter." My throat tightened. I took the phone. "Hello." "Hi, Grandpa." It was Olivia. She sounded cautious, like someone unsure if the door was locked or just stuck. "I heard you started a writing group," she said. "I did. I like writing. And Mom said you've changed." "I think I have," I said. "Or maybe I just remembered who I used to be." There was a pause. "Can I come visit?" My chest swelled with something that felt too big to name. "I'd love that," I said. She came the next weekend. 14 years old, head full of ideas and sarcasm. Looked like Rebecca. Smiled like Elaine. We walked by the river. We ate almond cookies. I showed her the overlook. When she saw the view, she said, "It looks like a painting." "It's better," I said. "Paintings can't breathe." She stayed 2 nights. On the last morning, we sat on the porch and wrote together. She didn't show me what she wrote, and I didn't ask. But before she left, she folded the paper and slipped it into my hand. "Don't read it until I'm gone," she said. After the card disappeared down the road, I opened it. It said, "I thought I didn't need you, but maybe I just needed to know you cared enough to show up again. I'm glad you did." I folded it carefully, put it in the same drawer as the napkin. By the time Christmas rolled around, I'd lived in Rivers End for 4 months. I had a small tree from the corner lot and a new thermos from Ken, the bike guy. Marjorie gave me a leather-bound journal. Mary made me a pie with a note that said, "Don't tell anyone I like you this much." Rebecca and Olivia came together. We cooked in Joyce's upstairs kitchen. We laughed so hard at dinner we nearly burned the ham. It was the best Christmas I'd had since Elaine died. I'm not sure what the rest of my life will look like. I'm still 81. My knees still ache when it rains. I forget where I put my glasses almost every day. But I know this. You're never too old to begin again. You're never too broken to be heard. You're never too forgotten to find your way home, even if home is somewhere you never expected. One morning in January, I stood at the overlook again. It had snowed. The river was half frozen, the trees bare and beautiful in their sleep. I took out my journal, and I wrote one last line under the napkin's old message. On discharge day, I wasn't picked up, I picked myself up. And I found a life that was waiting for me all along. Winter in River's End was slower than the rest of the world, and I liked it that way. The library quieted. The bakery started closing early. The bike stayed in the shed. But the writing group kept meeting. Every Thursday, without fail. Even when the power flickered or the wind howled. We wrote by candlelight once. It felt right. By February, I'd written nearly 200 pages. Not a novel. Not yet. But something. A memoir, I think. About fathers who fail and try again. About silence that turns into forgiveness. About how sometimes the most radical thing a person can do is choose to really live, even when they're closer to the end than the beginning. Rebecca called more often now. We didn't always say much. Sometimes we just shared what we were cooking, or how Olivia did on a test, or what the moon looked like over her backyard. But it wasn't about the words anymore. It was the fact that we were still talking, still showing up. In March, something changed. My chest started hurting one morning, just a pinch. Nothing dramatic. But I'd learned my lesson. I walked myself to the clinic, sat quietly, answered every question. They ran tests, called in a specialist. Eventually, a young doctor with kind eyes sat beside me and said the words I knew would come someday. "Your heart's weaker than we'd like. You've had damage over time. It's not urgent now, but it will be if we don't make changes." I nodded. He asked if I had family. "I do," I said, "and I think they'd like me to stick around a bit longer." He smiled. "Good. Let's work on that." I didn't tell Rebecca right away. I waited until I felt calm, until I wasn't telling her out of fear, but out of respect. When I did, she took a deep breath and said, "Okay, what do we need to do?" "We, not you." We made a plan. Changed my diet. Started short walks again. Olivia sent me a book on breathing exercises and texted me every Sunday with reminder, "Hydrate and do your stretches, old man." It became our joke. She even started calling me Grandpa again. That spring, I submitted my first piece for publication in over 30 years. It wasn't the memoir, just a short essay about the bench by the river and the way quiet towns let you remember who you are. I didn't expect to hear back, but 2 weeks later, I got an email. They were publishing it in a small literary journal, print and online. I read the email 3 times. Then I called Rebecca. "You're published?" she gasped. I smiled into the phone. "I guess I am." Olivia made me a badge out of construction paper that said "Official Old Writer Guy" and mailed it to me in a shoebox filled with confetti. It's still taped above my desk. That summer, River's End bloomed again. Children ran barefoot. Ken taught me how to fish off the pier. Marjorie retired from the library and passed the torch to a young woman named Sophia, who called me Mr. H and asked for writing prompts every Tuesday. Rebecca visited again, this time with Olivia and her new boyfriend, Evan, a quiet man with a laugh like thunder and kind eyes that reminded me of Elaine. We grilled in Joyce's garden. We talked late into the night. Olivia sat beside me and said, "You seem different than I remember." "How so?" "Lighter," she said. "Like you stopped carrying something that didn't belong to you anymore." I looked out at the stars. I think I just finally put it down. In August, on the anniversary of Elaine's passing, I walked to the overlook alone, brought a blanket, a photo, and a letter I'd written to her. It had taken me 27 years to say everything I needed to. I read it aloud to the wind. It didn't answer, but somehow I knew she'd heard. That fall, the writing group helped me edit the memoir. We met twice a week now. We had mugs with our names on them and a bulletin board where we posted each other's favorite lines. One evening, Connie, the widow who only ever wrote haikus, brought me a manila envelope. "You should send it out," she said. "The whole thing. To a real publisher. I hesitated. What if no one cares? She looked at me gently. We care. And that was enough. So I sent it. By November, I had 2 offers. Small presses, but real ones. Ones that wanted to publish the beginning again in full. I chose the one with the editor who cried on the phone after reading the last chapter. The book came out the next spring. Nothing fancy. No tour. No interviews. Just a quiet, beautiful paperback with a photo of the overlook on the cover. The town held a launch party at the library. People came from 2 towns over. Marjorie made punch. Joyce brought a cake shaped like a napkin. Ken cried and tried to hide it behind his sunglasses. Rebecca flew in for it. Olivia sat in the front row, grinning the entire time. I read the first page aloud. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. And when I finished, there was silence. Then applause. Then hugs. In the final chapter of my book, I wrote this. You can spend your whole life waiting to be picked up from the hospital, from heartbreak, from regret. But the truth is, you don't have to wait for anyone. You can stand up. You can walk. You can go somewhere unexpected. And when you do, you might find that life wasn't over, it was just waiting for you to begin again. It's been almost 2 years since discharge day. I still keep the original napkin. It's yellowed now. Fragile. But I look at it sometimes and remember the man who sat on that bench outside the hospital, suitcase in hand, unsure where to go. I remember what it felt like to stand. To walk. To choose a town no one expected. To choose myself. Last week, a new girl joined the writing group. 17. Nervous. Holding her notebook like a secret. I don't know if I belong here, she said. I handed her a mug. Sat beside her. And said, then you already do. She smiled. Opened her notebook. And began.